Hello, it's Bob Gray Sr. Welcome to Ministry Moments, and Lord willing, every Wednesday at 3 o'clock Central Time, our broadcast will be put on YouTube, so you can go to Ministry Moments YouTube and subscribe there, and I'd suggest that you do. You can also go to solvechurchproblems.com and find Ministry Moments on that listing of various things that we have there, and you can go ahead and click on there and subscribe. Well, I want to talk to you today about proselyting the gospel versus propagating the gospel. There's always that struggle that every pastor has. He wants to reach his city for Christ, and he's sincere and honest about it, wants to do it. And there always comes along this temptation, and I think it's not of God for sure, to get that growth and reach that city and to use maybe a tool that has not been used in years. For 2,000 years, Baptists have been doing it successfully in winning folks through soul winning, bus ministry. Of course, in the early days it was a camel ministry, but it's important that we understand the difference between proselyting and propagating. So let me go ahead and just give you my thoughts about this. Can I do that? Or I'm doing it anyway. Here we go. There are only so many transfers. In all the years, 33 years I pastored, I never cleaned up a church split across town. Never. Now I supplied them. When you get to the point where they know where you're going in the announcement time, they've about figured you out, and they're not going to make it through the preaching time. I'll tell you a funny thing. We had the best music in the world. Orchestra, choir, 40-piece orchestra, 70-voice choir. It was tremendous. And we had people who would come and sit through the music part of the ministry and then get up and leave before I started to preach. I thought that was funny. But proselyting versus propagating. Now the urge, and so I call it spiritual greed. If you're not careful, it'll overwhelm you to where you've got to get the biggest church in town or the growth or whatever it might be at no expense. And you don't care what it costs you to do it. Somebody gets mad, leaves the church, you go by and see them, and you say to them, the average pastor will say, well, what do I have to do to get you back? Now, what you're saying is everything I preach is on the line. You just tell me what you don't like, and I'll get rid of it. The problem with transfers is this. They come from every other church in town, and then if sooner or later, you're going to say to one group, yeah, I agree with you. Another group, yeah, I agree with you. Another group, yeah, I agree with you. And then they're going to have lunch one day, and you're going to be out the door. Much better to give birth, much better to win souls, much, much better. So my point number one is there are only so many transfers. That's all there are. And they're not that many. They're not that many. They find a reason for leaving there, and they'll find a reason for leaving you. I like what Brother House taught us as preacher voice. He said, make that front door small, and then you'll have that back door will be like this, but make that front door small, and then your back door will be like that. And he's right. There are only he's glad to hear that too, isn't he? There are only so many transfers. There are innumerable possible converts. Wow. We had in this area, not in Longview, when I came here, it was 70,000. It's up to 80,000 now. There's 100,000 in Tyler. But the entire Architects area, we ran buses, all of them. We reached them all, the Architects area. You just could not. For example, you have folks in your town now, age 10 years from now, they'll be 20. You'll never run out of people. You think you will. And you think that you can't keep up the soul winning. Oh, we've knocked at every door in town. You may have, but there are new people moving in and moving out all the time. And plus 10-year-olds become 20-year-olds and they get married and have children. So it's important, there are only so many transfers. So don't get locked in this thing. You've got to be able to do something to get the people to come to your church. Number two. Now, by the way, I could point out Southern Baptist churches that I've known all of a sudden just went from zero to running 2,000 almost overnight. But if you check into it, it wasn't through the baptismal pool. It was by a young pastor coming to town on fire, and they leave all the other Southern Baptist churches and come to town. In Dallas, great big churches there. And they had the Saturday Night Live concerts. And these pastors, dumb pastors, would take their teenagers down to this big complex, this big place, and they sit there on Saturday night, and then pretty soon they're sitting there on Sunday morning. So now, if you want to do that, that's your choice, but you'll pay the consequences for it. I'll say it again: there are only so many transfers. I'll say it again: there are an innumerable number of converts. Next, church growth for church growth's sake is wrong. Let me say it again: church growth for church growth's sake is wrong. Soul winning is not meant to build a church. No. Jesus said, Matthew 18, I will build my church. What's your job? Your job is to bring the material and let him choose what he wants to choose to build that local church. So church growth for church, I wasn't in this thing for church growth. I was in this thing for reaching everybody I could with the gospel. Dr. Wendell Evans, God bless him, my wife worked for him. He was chancellor at Hyles Anderson College, and my wife worked for him. And before I left to go pastor in Illinois, he said, decade growth, Brother Gray, decade growth. You do you do the soul winning. So the numbers that I came up with were soul winning night numbers. And I got that from John Rice. John Rice told me, he said, you give me 100 on Thursday, and he called it visitation, but it was soul winning visitation. I'll give you 1,000 on Sunday eventually. So growth for growth's sake is not why we're doing this. We're trying to keep everybody out of hell that we can. And we get them, we teach them and train them, and then they go out and win others to Christ. So proselyting versus propagating. Number one, there are only so many transfers. Number two, there are innumerable possible converts. Number three, church growth for church growth's sake is wrong. Number four, begin questioning Bible methods used by Baptists for 2,000 years is where it begins. Where does all this begin? It begins by you questioning Dr. Lee Robertson, Dr. Jack Hyles, Dr. Tom Malone, and on I could go. We begin to question them. Why? Because our buddies around us are discovering, oh my, if I take my tie off and have an untucked shirt and grow a little 5 o'clock shadow up here and loosen up a little bit with your music, loosen up a little bit. Why, those people will come. And now, if that's what you're after, that's fine. I'm not. I'm after souls. I want to get as many people saved as I can, which means I got to be able to get saved. I got to train them to win others to Christ. If it means a church growth, great. If it means a church loss, great. It doesn't matter. My purpose is winning every soul I can win to keep them out of hell. So number one, there are only so many transfers. Now, if that's the route you want to take it. You'll be wrong. Number two, somebody said, I disagree with you, Bob Gray. I said, well, if you and I agreed, we'd both be wrong. If I agreed with you, we'd both be wrong. There are only so many transfers. There are innumerable possible converts. Church growth for church growth's sake is wrong. That's not why we're doing this. Number four, you begin questioning Bible methods used by Baptists for 2,000 years is where it all begins. Next, turning soul winning into service groups is wrong. Let me say it again. Turning soul winning into service groups is wrong. You may think you've talked to everybody in your city, but people have gone from 10 to 20. They're getting older. Now, you quit fooling around with this. Am I against service groups? Absolutely not. I think the deacons ought to take care of the widows. I think we ought to feed the poor. Gave $320-some-thousand to help the poor. In 30 years, I pastored in town, and that was a gleanings offering. Sunday night was all over. Brother Paul Duckett, Dr. Duckett would come to me with a list of families that needed help. And so we'd go as far as the money would go. But it ended up 327, I think. But don't hold me to that. But I'm just saying, we did our part. We built ramps for members and community people who didn't have for wheelchair access. We did that. We put roofs on houses. We had a clothing closet. We had a food pantry. Oh, we did it. We did it all. You can do both. Oh, is that a soul winning church or is that a family church? No, it's both. And all you're doing is trying to get away from soul winning. That's all you're trying to do. Now, here's some things I put down. I put a list of proselyting and then another list of propagating, one versus the other. Proselyting, they major on teaching. Propagating, they major on preaching. Preaching. Were great preachers of the past built the great churches. Oh, yes. They major on teaching. That's propagating. Proselyting. Propagating is major on preaching. Next, proselyting. I got down. I pinned this down. Less teachable. They already know everything. That's why they left the last guy, because they disagreed with him, told him so. Now they come here. Guess what they're going to do? They're eventually going to find out something they disagree with you. There's a difference between being a critic and critiquing. When you carry the burden, you have a right to critique it to make sure you can carry more burdens. But if you're sitting back doing nothing, you're just critical, you don't produce nothing. The guy who critiques will produce. The guy who criticizes will not. And these people left that church because they became critical there. And they're going to leave your church because they become critical of you. I know what I'm talking about. No personal soul winning, that's proselyting. Personal soul winning as a focus, that's propagating. That's the difference. I said one majors on teaching, the other majors on preaching. One is less teachable, the other is more teachable. One has no personal soul winning as a goal, the other has personal soul winning as a goal. Next, I wrote this down. The proselyting is a committee run or deacon run, eventually. Committee run or deacon run. The propagating church, the soul winning church, is pastor run. Number 5, the proselyting are first milers. The propagating are second milers. They will go, oh, you're going to visit for 1 hour. They'll visit 2. Something about them. They're driven. They've got to win souls. I've got to keep people out of hell. All right, there is a hell. All right, so proselyting, I said they major on teaching. They're less teachable. There's no personal soul winning drive or goal. They're committee run or board run, deacon run. They are first milers. Number 6, now you're going to like this one. They're rich. That's the rich church. That's the rich. I had 40 bus routes, 40 some buses. It cost money. It cost money. And who did we reach? The poor. So how did we get the money to run the buses? God gave it to us. But we weren't rich. But I know pastors take over churches with a large bus and cut it all out. Why? Too much money. Then they'll make such stupid statements like, until you fill your car up on Sunday morning, we're not running a bus. Well, if that's the case, there wouldn't be a bus ministry in America or in the world. Jeepney routes over where Brother Martin is, Rick Martin. Now, I'm just simply saying to you, please listen to me. Yeah, you can cut. I said to Ms. Ayers one time, I'd like to do, she's my financial lady. She had 3 ladies working for her. I said, I'd like to do, I had a wish list every December. I said, I'd like to do this and this and this. And she said one day, we could do all of that if we didn't have all these buses. And that's what some do. They cut the buses out. And I'll tell you what, Brother Hiles' properties were functional, but they were not like the Taj Mahal. They were functional. And when you young guys take over, all of a sudden you've got to update everything. And it looks like a major corporation office. Or what in the world? How in the world can you spend that kind of? Oh, I know. You cut the buses out. Oh, I understand. All right. So I said proselyting, major on teaching, less teachable, no personal soul winning as a goal, committee run or board run, first milers, rich. 7, more critical. Number 8, herd mentality. They run with a herd mentality. A herd mentality. Nobody's going to stand up and fight for right. They all move the same. There's a herd mentality. All right. But propagating the gospel, they major on preaching. They're more teachable. Personal soul winning is the drive and the goal. Pastor run, second milers. Never like this, but poor. We had 12 sections of lower floor, 10 sections of balcony. If you sat in the back corner back there and looked across that crowd and realized what we had to have every week to survive, you'd shake your head and say, there's no way. At one time, we had to have $62,300 a week. If you looked at that crowd, you'd say, man, there ain't a nickel in this crowd. But God took care of us. Same thing about God took care of us. All right. So I said propagating, major on preaching, more teachable. Personal soul winning is the drive and the goal. Committee run or board run. They are first milers only. They're rich because they're running the bus ministry. They're more critical. And a herd mentality. Now in propagating, I wrote this down. The major on preaching. They're more teachable. Personal soul winning is the drive and the goal. Pastor run, second milers, poor, less critical, and a sheep mentality. A sheep mentality. And they know the voice of the shepherd. The sheep mentality. Proselytizing versus propagating. Be careful. Be careful. This emerging church, these young fellows coming up with all these brilliant ideas that they've got. Well, if we just took our young people and they just painted houses and cut grass and trimmed the hedges. I've never had anybody walk up to me and say, boy, I like the way you cut your lawn. What must I do to be saved? I like the way that Mrs. Gray wears dresses. What must I do to be saved? Oh, open up your mouth and tell them how to be saved. Go. Now, if you do the other, there's nothing wrong with the other. Absolutely nothing. We had it. We had the food pantry. Oh, and it worked too. We had the clothing room. We had the bus ministry. We ministered and reached the poor. We helped the poor. $320,000, 30 years, just Sunday night, nickels and dimes and dollars after the day was over. We did it. It can be done. But don't cut the soul winning out. And you're not going to grow by proselyting and find yourself not having to pay a price, because there will be a price. God bless you. I hope this helped you a little bit. And ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas. Don't leave Jesus out this year. God bless you. Thank you for being a part of this broadcast. And I'll see you again next week, Lord willing, at 3 o'clock Central Time. God bless.